My only near relative, a sister, died 5 years ago. So that I am independent. I breakfast this morning at 9, and after glancing through the morning paper, I lightened my pipe and proceeded to let my mind wander in the hope that I might chance upon some subject for my pencil. The room, though door and windows were open, was oppressively hot, and I had just made up my mind that the coolest and most comfortable place in the neighborhood would be the deep end of the public swimming bath when the idea came. I began to draw. So intent was I on my work that I left my lunch untouched, only stopping work when the clock of St. Jude's struck 4. The final result for a hurried sketch was, I felt sure, the best thing I had done. It showed a criminal in the dock immediately after the judge had pronounced sentence. The man was fat, enormously fat. The flesh hung in rolls about his chin. It creased his huge, stumpy neck. He was clean-shaven, perhaps I should say a few days before he must have been clean-shaven, and almost bald. He stood in the dock, his short, clumsy fingers clasping the rail, looking straight in front of him. The feeling that his expression conveyed was not so much one of horror as of utter, absolute collapse. There seemed nothing in the man strong enough to sustain that mountain of flesh. I rolled up the sketch and, without quite knowing why, placed it in my pocket. Then, with the rare sense of happiness which the knowledge of a good thing well done gives, I left the house. I believe that I set out with the idea of calling upon Trenton, for I remember walking around Lighton Street and turning to the right along Gilchrist Road at the bottom of the hill where the men were at work on the new tram lines. From there onwards, I have only the vaguest recollection of where I went. The only thing of which I fully conscious was the awful heat that came up from the dusty asphalt pavement as an almost palpable wave. I longed for the thunder promised by the great banks of copper-colored cloud that hung low over the western sky. I must have walked 5 or 6 miles when a small boy roused me from my reverie by asking time. It was 20 minutes to 7. When he left me, I began to take stock of my bearings. I found myself standing before a gate that led into a yard bordered by a strip of thirsty earth, where there were flowers, purple stalk, and scarlet geranium. Above the entrance was a board with the inscription, Chas Atkinson, monumental mason, worker in English and Italian marbles. From the yard itself came a cheery whistle, the noise of hammer blows, and the cold sound of steel meeting stone. A sudden impulse made me enter. A man sitting with his back towards me, busy at work on a slab of curiously veined marble. He turned around as he heard my steps, and I stopped short. It was the man I had been drawing, whose portrait lay in my pocket. He sat there, huge and elephantine, the sweat pouring from his scalp, which he wiped with a red silk handkerchief. But though the face was the same, the expression was absolutely different. He greeted me smiling, as if we were old friends, and shook my hand. I apologized for my intrusion. Ugh, everything is hot and glary outside. It seems an oasis of wilderness. I don't know about the oasis, but it's certainly hot. Hot as hell. Take a seat, sir. He pointed to the end of the gravestone on which he was at work, and I sat down. That's a beautiful piece of stone you got a hold of. In a way it is. The surface here is as fine as anything you could wish for, but there's a big flaw at the back. Though, I don't expect you to ever notice. I could never make really a good job of a bit of marble like that. But it'd be all right in the summer like this. I wouldn't mind the blasted heat, but wait till the winter comes. There's nothing quite like frost to find out the weak points, stone. Then, what's it for? You hardly believe me if I was to tell you, for an exhibition. And it's the truth. Artists have exhibitions. So do grocers and butchers. We have them too. All the latest little things and headstones, you know. He went on to talk of marbles, which sort best withstood wind and rain, and which were easiest to work. Then of his garden and a new sort of carnation he had bought. At the end of every other minute, he would drop his tools, wipe his shining head, and curse the heat. I said little, for I felt uneasy. There was something unnatural, uncanny, in meeting this man. I tried at first to persuade myself that I had seen him before, that his face, unknown to me, had found a place in some out-of-the-way corner of my memory. But I knew that I was practicing little more than a plausible piece of self-deception. Mr. Atkinson finished his work, spat on the ground, and got up with a sigh of relief. Ah, there. What do you think of that? The inscription, which I read for the first time, was this: Sacred to the memory of James Clarence Withencroft, born January 18th, 1860. He passed away very suddenly on August 20th, 19. In the midst of life, we are in death. For some time, I sat in silence, and a cold shudder ran down my spine. I asked him where he had seen the name. Oh, I didn't see it anywhere. I wanted some name, and I put down the first name that came into my head. Why do you want to know? Oh, nothing. It's just a strange coincidence. But it happens to be my name. He gave a long, low whistle. And the dates? Oh, I can only answer for one of them, and that's correct. It's a rum go, he said. But he knew less than I did. I told him of my morning's work. I took the sketch from my pocket and showed it to him. As he looked, the expression of his face altered until it became more and more like that of a man I had drawn. And it was only the day before yesterday, he said, that I told Maria that there were no such things as ghosts. Neither of us had seen a ghost, but I knew what he meant. I mean, you probably heard my name. Yeah, and you must have seen me somewhere and have forgotten it. Were you at Clatkin at sea last year in July? I had never been to Clacton in my life. We were silent for some time. We were both looking at the same thing. The 2 dates on the gravestone, and one was right. Come inside and have some supper, said Mr. Atkinson. His wife is a cheerful little woman with the flaky red cheeks of the crunchy bread. Her husband introduced me as a friend of his who was an artist. The result was unfortunate, for after the sardines and watercress had been removed, he brought out a Dora Bible. And I had sit and express my admiration for nearly half an hour. I went outside and found Atkinson sitting on the gravestone smoking. We resumed the conversation at the point we had left off. You must excuse my asking, but do you know of anything you've done of which you could put on trial? He shook his head. I'm not a bankrupt. The business is prosperous enough. 2 years ago, I gave turkeys to some of the guardians at Christmas. That's all I can think of. They were small ones too. He got up, fetched a can from the porch, and began to water flowers. Twice a day regular in the hot weather, and then the heat sometimes gets the better of the delicate ones. And ferns, good Lord, they could never stand it. Where do you live? I told him my address. It would take an hour's quick walk to get back home. It's like this. We'll look at the matter straight. You go back home tonight, you take your chance of accidents. A car may run over you, and there's always banana skins and orange peels, to say nothing of fallen ladders. He spoke of the improbable with intense seriousness that would have been laughable 6 hours before. But I did not laugh. The best thing we can do, he continued, is for you to stay here till 12 o'clock. Or go upstairs and smoke. It may be cooler inside. To my surprise, I agreed. We are sitting now in a long, low room beneath the eaves. Atkinson sent his wife to bed. He himself is busy sharpening some tools at a little oil stone, smoking one of my cigars the while. The air seems charged with thunder. I am writing this at a shaky table before the open window. The leg is cracked, and Atkinson, who seems a handy man with his tools, is going to mend it as soon as he has finished putting an edge on his chisel. It is after 11 now. I shall be gone in less than an hour. But the heat is stifling. It's enough to send a man mad. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? Your boy Esco back again. Another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled A School Story, written by M.R. James. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to the author, like, comment, and subscribe. Two men in a smoking room were talking about their private school days. At our school, we had a ghost footmark on the staircase. What was it like? Oh, very unconvincing. Just the shape of a shoe with a square toe, if I remember right. The staircase was a stone one. I never heard any story about the thing. That seems odd when you think about it. Why didn't somebody invent one? Yeah, you can never tell with little boys. They have a mythology of their own. Yeah, there's a subject for you. The folklore of private schools. Ah, yes. Crop is rather scanty though, I imagine. If you were to investigate the cycle of ghost stories, for instance, which the boys of private schools tell each other, they will all turn out to be a highly compressed version of stories out of books. Nowadays, the Strand and Pearsons and so on would be extensively drawn upon. No doubt. They weren't born or thought of in my time. Let's see. Wonder if I can remember the staple ones that I was told. At first, there was the house with the room, in which a series of people insisted on passing a night. And each of them, in the morning, was found kneeling in the corner and had just time to say, "I've seen it," and died. Wasn't that the house in Berkeley Square? I dare say it was. Then there was the man who heard a noise in the passage at night, opened his door, and saw something crawling towards him on all fours with eyes hanging out of his cheek. There was, besides, let me think. Ah, yes, the room where a man was found dead in bed, with a horseshoe mark on his forehead, and the floor under the bed was covered with marks of horseshoes as well. I don't know why. Also, there was a lady who, unlocking her bedroom door in a strange house, heard a thin voice among the bedroom curtains say, "Now we're shut in for the night." None of those had any explanation or sequel. Wonder if they go on still, those stories. Oh, likely enough, with additions from the magazines, as I said. You never heard, did you? Of a real ghost at a private school? I thought not. Nobody that I know has ever come across one. Well, from which, the way you said it, I gather that you have. I really don't know. But this is what is on my mind. It happened at my private school 30 odd years ago, and I haven't had any explanation of it. The school, was near London. It was established in a large and fairly old house. A great white building with very fine grounds about it. There were large cedars in the garden, as there are in so many of the older gardens in the Thames Valley, and ancient elms in the 3 or 4 fields which we used for our games. I think probably it was quite an attractive place, but boys seldom allow that their schools possess any tolerable features. I came to the school in September, soon after the year 1870, and among the boys who arrived on the same day was one whom I took to, a Highland boy whom I will call MacLeod. I need to spend time in describing him. The main thing is that I got to know him very well. He was not an exceptional boy in any way. Not particularly good at books or games, but he suited me. The school was a large one. There must have been from 120 to 130 boys there as a rule, and so a considerable staff of masters were required, and there were rather frequent changes among them. One term, perhaps it was my 3rd or 4th, a new master made his appearance. His name was Samson. He He was a tallish, stoutish, pale, black-bearded man. I think we liked him. He had traveled a good deal and had stories which amused us on our school walks. That there was some competition among us to get within an earshot of him. I remember too, dear me. I have hardly thought of it since then. And he had a charm on his watch chain that attached to my attention one day. And he let me examine it. It was, I now suppose, a gold Byzantine coin. There was an effigy of some absurd emperor on one side, and the other side had been worn practically smooth. And he had a cut on it, rather barbarously. His own initials, G.W.S., and a date, July 24th, 1865. Yes, I can see it now. He told me he had picked it up in Constantinople, and it was about the size of a florin, perhaps rather smaller. Well, the first odd thing that happened was this. Samson was doing Latin grammar with us, one of his favorite methods. Perhaps it is a rather good one, was to make us construct sentences out of our own heads to illustrate the rules he was trying to make us learn. Of course, that is a thing which gives a silly boy a chance of being impertinent. There are lots of school stories in which that happens, or anyhow, there might be. But Samson was too good a disciplinarian for us to think of trying that on with him. Now, on this occasion, he was telling us how to express remembering in Latin, and he'd ordered us each to make a sentence bringing in the verb memini, I remember. Well, most of us made some ordinary sentence such as, I remember my father, or he remembers his book, or something equally uninteresting. And I dare say, a good many put down memino librum meum, and so forth. And the boy I mentioned, McLeod, was eventually thinking of something more elaborate than that. The rest of us wanted to have our sentences passed to get on to something else. Someone kicked me under the desk, and I, who was next to him, poked him and whispered to him, look sharp. But he didn't seem to attend. I looked at his paper and saw he had put nothing at all. So I jogged him again harder than before and upbraided him sharply for keeping us all waiting. That did have some effect. He started and seemed to wake up. And then very quickly he scribbled about a couple of lines on his paper and showed it up to the rest. As it was the last, or nearly the last, come in, and as Samson had a good deal to say about to the boys who had written Memeniscus Patri Meo, and the rest of it, turned out the clock struck 12 before he had got to McLeod. McLeod had to wait afterwards to have his sentence corrected. There was nothing much going on outside when I got out, so I waited for him to come. He came very slowly when he did arrive, and I guess there had to be some sort of trouble. So I said, what'd you get? Oh, I don't know. Nothing much, but I think Samson's rather sick of me. Why? Did you show him up some rot? No fear. It was all right, as far as I could see. It was like this. Memento. That's right. Enough for remember. and it takes a genitive. Momento pute inter quator taxos. What silly rot. What made you shove that down? What does that even mean? I'm not quite sure what it does mean. All I know is it just came to my head and I corked it down. I know what I think it means, because just before I wrote it down, I had some sort of picture of it in my head. I believe it means remember, the well among the four. What are those dark sort of trees that have red berries on them? Mountain ashes, I suppose you mean. I never heard of them. No, I'll tell you, use. Well, and what did Samson say? Why, he was jolly odd about it. When he had read it, he got up and went to the mantelpiece and stopped quite a long time without saying anything. And then he said, while turning around and rather quiet, "What do you suppose that means?" I told him what I thought, only I couldn't remember the name of the silly tree. And then he wanted to know why I put it down. And I had to say something or other. And after that, he left off talking about it and asked me how long I'd been here and where my people lived and things like that. And then I came away. But he hasn't looked a bit well. I don't remember any more that was said by either of us about this. And the next day, McLeod took to his bed with a chill or something of the kind. And it was a week or more before he was in school again. And as much as a month went by without anything happening that was noticeable, McLeod had thought. He didn't show it. Pretty sure, of course now, that there was something very curious in his past history, but I'm not going to pretend that we boys were sharp enough to guess any such thing. There was one other incident of the same kind at the last, which I told you. Several times since that day, we had to make up examples in school to illustrate different rules. But there have never been any row except when we did them wrong. At least there came a day when we were going through those dismal things which people call conditional sentences, and we were told to make a conditional sentence expressing a future consequence. We did it, right or wrong, and showed up our bits of paper, and Samson began looking through them. All at once, he got up, made some odd sort of noise in his throat, and rushed out by the door that was just by his desk. We sat there for a minute or two, and then, I suppose it was incorrect, but we went up. I, one, and two others. And look at the papers at his desk. Of course, thought someone must have put down some nonsense or other, and Samson had gone off to report him. All the same, I noticed that he hadn't taken any of the papers with him when he ran out. Well, the top paper on the desk was written in red ink, which no one used. And it wasn't in anyone's hand who was in this class. They all looked at it, McLeod and all, and took their dying oaths that it wasn't theirs. And then I thought of counting the bits of paper, and of this I made quite certain that there were 17 bits of paper on the desk and 16 boys in the form. Well, I bagged the extra paper and kept it, and I believe I have it now. And now you will want to know what was written on it, right? It was simple enough and harmless enough, it should have said. Si tu non venris ad me, ego veniam a te. Which means, I suppose, if you don't come to me, I'll come to you. Could you show me the paper? Interrupted the listener. Yes, I could, but there's something odd about the thing. Same afternoon, I took it out of my locker. I know for certain it was the same bit, for I made a finger mark on it, and no single trace of writing of any kind was on it. I kept it, as I said, and since that time I have tried various experiments to see whether sympathetic ink had been used, but obviously without result. So much for that. And after about half an hour, Samson looked in again, and he had felt very unwell and told us we might go. He came rather gingerly to his desk and gave us one look at the utmost paper, and I suppose he thought we must have been dreaming. Anyhow, he asked no questions. That day was half holiday, and the next day Samson was in school again, much as usual. The night the third and last incident in my story happened. We, McLeod and I, slept in a dormitory at right angles to the main building. Samson slept in the main building on the first floor. There was a very bright full moon. At an hour which I can't tell exactly, sometime between 1 and 2, I was woken up by somebody shaking me. It was McLeod. In a nice state of mind he seemed to be in, said, Come, there's a burglar getting in through Samson's window. As soon as I could speak, I said, Well, why not call out and wake everybody up? No. I'm not sure who it is. Don't make a row. Come and look. Naturally, I came and looked, and naturally, there was no one there. I was cross enough and should have called McLeod plenty of names. Only, I couldn't tell why. It seemed to me that there was something wrong. Something that made me very glad I wasn't alone to face it. We were still at the window, looking out, and as soon as I could, I asked him what we had seen or heard. Well, I didn't hear anything at all. About 5 minutes before I woke you, I found myself looking out his window, and there was a man sitting and kneeling on Samson's windowsill, looking in. What sort of man? I don't know, but I can tell you one thing. He was beastly thin, and he looked as if he was wet all over. And looking around and whispering, he said, I'm not sure it's alive. He went on talking in whispers some time longer, and eventually crept back to bed. No one else in the room woke or stirred the whole time. I believe we did sleep a bit afterwards, but we were very cheap next day. The next day, Mr. Samson was gone, not to be found, and I believe no trace of him has ever come to light since. In thinking it over, one of the oddest things about it all has seemed to me to be the fact that neither McLeod nor I ever mentioned what we had seen to any third person whatsoever. Of course, no questions were asked on the subject, and if they had been, I'm inclined to believe that we could not have made any answer. We seemed unable to speak about it. That is my story. The only approach to a ghost story connected at a school that I know. But still, I think an approach to such a thing. The sequel to this, perhaps, would be reckoned highly conventional, but a sequel there is, and so it must be produced. There had been more than one listener to the story, and in the latter part of the same year or the next one such listener was staying at a country house in Ireland. One evening, his host was turning over a drawer full of odds and ends in the smoking room. Suddenly, he put his hands upon a little box. "Now, you know about old things. Tell me, what is this?" My friend opened the little box and found it in a thin gold chain with an object attached to it. He glanced at the object and then took off his spectacles to examine it more narrowly. "What's the history of this?" Odd enough," was the answer. "You know, the yew thicket and the shrubbery? Well, a year or two back, we were cleaning out the old well that used to be in the clearing there. What do you suppose we found?" "Is it possible that you found a body?" "We did that, but what's more, in every sense of the word, we found two." "Good heavens, two? Was there anything to show how they got there? Was this thing found with them?" It was. Amongst the rags of the clothes that were on the bodies. A bad business, whatever the story of it may have been. One body had the arms tight around each other. It must have been there 30 years or more. Long enough before we came to this place. You may judge we filled the well up fast enough. Do you make anything of what's cut on the gold coin you have there? I think I can. Holding it to the light, it seems to be EWS, July 24th, 1865. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? Your boy Esco, back again with another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled Ancient Lights, written by Algernon Blackwood. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to the author, like, comment, and subscribe. From Southwater, where he left the train, the road led due west. That he knew. For the rest, he trusted to luck, being one of those born walkers who disliked asking the way. He had that instinct, and as a rule, it served him well. Okay, a mile or so due west along the sandy road till you come to a stile on the right. Then across the fields, you'll see the red house straight before you. He glanced at the postcard's instructions once again, and once again he tried to decipher the scratched-out sentence without success. It had been so elaborately inked over that no word was legible. Inked-out sentences in a letter were always enticing. He wondered what it was that had to be so very carefully obliterated. The afternoon was boisterous, with the tearing, shouting wind that blew from the sea across the Sussex Weald. Massive clouds with rounded, piled-up edges cannon across gaping spaces of blue sky. Far away, the line of downs swept the horizon like an arriving wave. Tercanbury Ring rode their crest, a scudding ship, all down before the wind. He took his hat off and walked rapidly, breathing great draughts of air with delight and exhilaration. The road was deserted. No horsemen, bicycles, or mortars. Not even a tradesman cart. No single walker. But anyhow, he would never have asked the way. Keeping a sharp eye for the stile, he pounded along, while the wind tossed the cloak against his face and made waves across the blue puddles in the yellow road. The trees showed their underleaves of white. The bracken and the high new grass bent all one way. Great life was in the day, high spirits and dancing everywhere. And for a Croydon surveyor's clerk just out of an office, this was like a holiday at sea. It was a day for high adventure, and his heart rose up to meet the mood of nature. His umbrella with the silver ring ought to have been a sword, and his brown shoes should have been top boots with spurs upon the heels. Where hid the enchanted castle and the princess with the hair of sunny gold? His horse. The stile suddenly came into view and nipped adventure in the bud. Everyday clothes took him prisoner again. He was a surveyor's clerk, middle-aged, earning £3 a week, coming from Croydon to see about the client's proposed alterations in a wood something to ensure a better view from the dining room. Across the fields, perhaps a mile away, he saw the red house gleaming in the sunshine, and resting on the stile a moment to get his breath, he noticed a copse of oak and hornbeam on the right. Aha! Well, this must be the wood he wants to cut down to improve the view. I'll have a look at it. There were boards up, of course, but there was an inviting little path as well. Not a trespasser, then. Part of my business, this is. He scrambled awkwardly over the gate and entered the copse. A little round would bring him to the field again. But the moment he passed among the trees, the wind ceased shouting, and a stillness dropped upon the world. So dense was the growth that the sunshine only came through in isolated patches. The air was close. He mopped his forehead, put his green felt hat on, but a low branch knocked it off again. And as he stopped, an elastic twig swaying back struck his face. There were flowers along both edges of the little path. Glades open either side. Ferns curved about in damper corners, and the smell of earth and foliage was rich and sweet. It was cooler here. What an enticing little wood, he thought, turning down all small green glade where sunshine flickered like silver wings. How it danced and fluttered and moved about. He put a blue dark flower in his buttonhole. Again, his hat, caught by an oak branch as he rose, was knocked from his head, falling across his eyes. And this time, he did not put it back on. Swinging his umbrella, he walked on with uncovered head, whistling rather loudly as he went. But the thickness of the trees hardly encouraged whistling. Something of his gaiety High spirits seemed to leave him. Found himself suddenly treading circumspectly with a caution. The stillness on the wood was so peculiar. There was a rustle among the ferns and leaves. Something shot across the path 10 yards ahead. Stopped abruptly an instant, head cocked sideways to stare, then dived again beneath the underbush with the speed of a shadow. There was a rustle among the ferns and leaves, and something shot across the path 10 yards ahead. Stopped abruptly, instant, head cocked sideways to stare, then dived again beneath the underbush with the speed of a shadow. He started like a frightened child, laughing the next second that a mere pheasant could have made him jump. In the distance, he heard wheels upon the road, and wondered why the sound was pleasant. Ah, good old butcher's cart, he said to himself. Then realized that he was going in the wrong direction and had somehow got turned around. For the road should be behind them, not in front. And he hurriedly took another narrow glade that lost itself in greenness to the right. Ah, that's my direction, of course. The trees has mixed me up a bit, it seems. Then he found himself abruptly by a gate he had first climbed over. He had merely made a circle. Surprise became almost discomfiture then, and a man dressed like a gatekeeper, brown and green, leaned against the gate, hitting his legs with the switch. Hey, I'm making for Mr. Looney's farm. This is his wood, I believe. Then stopped dead, because it was no man at all, but merely an effect of light, shade, and foliage. He stepped back to reconstruct the singular illusion, but the wind shook the branches roughly here on the edge, and the foliage refused to reconstruct the figure. Leaves all rustled strangely, and just then the sun went behind the cloud, making the whole wood look otherwise. Yet how the mind could be thus doubly deceived was indeed remarkable, for it almost seemed to him the man had answered, spoken, or was it the shuffling noise the branches made, and had pointed with his switch to the notice board upon the nearest tree. The words rang in his head, but of course he had imagined them. No, it's not his wood, it's ours. And some village wit, moreover, had changed the lettering to the weather-beaten board, for it read quite plainly, trespassers will be persecuted. And while the astonished clerk read the words and chuckled, he said to himself, thinking what a tale he'd have to tell his wife and children later. The blooming wood has tried to chuck me out. But I'll go in again. Why? It's only a matter of a square acre at most. I'm bound to reach the fields on the other side if I keep straight on. He remembered his position in the office. He had a certain dignity maintained. The cloud passed from below the sun, and light splashed suddenly in all manner of unlikely places. The man went straight on. He felt a touch of puzzling confusion somewhere. This way, the copse had a shifting from sunshine and shadow, doubtless troubled by a little. To his relief at last, a new glade opened through the trees and disclosed the fields with a glimpse of the red house in the distance at the far end. But a little wicket gate that stood across the path had first to be climbed, and as he scrambled heavily over, for it would not open, he got the astonishing feeling that it slid off sideways beneath his weight and towards the wood. Like the moving staircases at Harrod's and Errol's court, it began to glide off with him. It was quite horrible. He made a vital effort to get down, for it carried him into the trees. But his feet became entangled with the bars and umbrella, so that he fell heavily upon the farther side. Arms spread across, grass and nettles, boots clutched between the first and second bars. He lay there. While he struggled to get disentangled, feet, bars, and umbrella formed a regular net. He saw the little man, browny green, go past him with extreme rapidity through the wood. The man was laughing. He passed across the glade some 50 yards away. He was not alone this time. Companion like himself went with him. The clerk, now upon his feet again, watched him disappear into the gloom of green beyond. Ugh, they're tramps, not gamekeepers. But his heart was thumping dreadfully, and he dared not utter all his thought. He examined the wicket gate, convinced it was a trick gate somehow, then went hurriedly on again, disturbed beyond belief to see that the glade no longer opened its fields, but curved away to the right. What in the world had happened to him? His sight was so utterly at fault. Again the sun flamed out abruptly and lit the floor of the wood with pools of silver, and at the same moment a violent gust of wind passed shouting overhead. Drops fell clattering everywhere upon the leaves, making a sharp pattering as of many footsteps. The whole copse shuddered and went moving. Rain, by George, thought the clerk, and feeling for his umbrella, discovered he had lost it. He turned back to the gate and found it lying on the farther side. To his amazement, he saw the fields at the far end of the glade, a red house too, ashine in the sunset. He laughed then, for of course, in his struggle with the gate, he had somehow got it turned around, had fallen back instead of forwards. Climbing over, this time quite easily, he retraced his steps. The silver band, he saw, had been torn from the umbrella. No doubt his foot, a nail, or something had caught in it and ripped it off. The clerk began to run. He felt extraordinarily dismayed. But while he ran, the entire wood ran with him, round him, to and fro, trees shifting like living things, leaves folding and unfolding, trunks darting backwards and forwards, and branches disclosing enormous empty spaces and closing up again before he can look into them. There were footsteps everywhere, and laughing, crying voices, crowds of figures gathering just behind his back, till the glade he knew was thick with moving life. The wind in his ears, of course, produced the voices and the laughter, while sun and clouds plunging the copse, alternately in shadow and bright dazzling light, created the figures. But he did not like it, and went as fast as ever his sturdy legs could take him. He was frightened now. This was no story for his wife and children. He ran like the wind, but his feet made no sound upon the soft, mossy turf. Then, to his horror, he saw that the glade grew narrow. Nettles and weeds stood thick across it. It dwindled down to a tiny path. 20 yards ahead, it stopped finally and melted off among the trees. What the trick gate had failed to achieve, this twisting glade accomplished easily. Carried him bodily among the dense, crowding trees. There was only one thing to do. Turn sharply and dash back again. Run headlong into the life that followed at his back. Followed so closely that now it almost touched him, pushing him in. And with reckless courage, this was what he did. It seemed the fearful thing to do. He turned with a sort of violent spring, head down, shoulders forward, hands stretched before his face. He made the plunge. Like a hunted creature, he changed full tilt the other way, meeting the wind now in his face. Good Lord! The glade behind them had closed up as well. There was no longer any path at all. Turning round and round like an animal at bay, he searched for an opening, a way to escape. Searched frantically, breathlessly, terrified now in his bones. But foliage surrounded him. Branches blocked the way. The trees stood close and still, unshaken by a breath of wind, and the sun dipped that moment behind a great black cloud. The entire wood turned dark and silent. It watched him. Perhaps it was this final touch of sudden blackness that made him act so foolishly, as though he had really lost head. At any rate, without pausing to think, he dashed headlong in among the trees again. There was a sensation of being stiflingly surrounded and entangled that he must break out at all costs. Out and straight into an oak that deliberately moved into his path to stop him. He saw it shift across the good full yard, and being a measuring man accustomed to his theodolite and chain, he ought to know. He fell, saw stars, and felt 1,000 tiny fingers tugging and pulling at his hands, neck, and ankles. Stinging nettles, no doubt, were responsible for this. He thought of it later. At the moment, he felt diabolically calculated. But another remarkable illusion was not so easily explained. For all in a moment, it seemed the entire wood went sliding past him, with a thick, deep rustling of leaves and laughter, myriad footsteps, and tiny little, active, energetic shapes. Two men in browny green gave him a mighty hoist, and he opened his eyes to find himself lying in the meadow beside the stile where first his incredible adventure had begun. The wood, in its usual place, stared down upon him in the sunlight. There was a red house in the distance as before. Above him grinned a weather being noticed board. Trespassers will be persecuted. Disheveled in mind and body, and a good deal shaken in his official soul, the clerk slowly walked across the fields. But on the way, he glanced once more at the postcard's instructions and saw with dull amazement that the inked-out sentence was quite legible after all beneath the scratches made across it. There is a shortcut through the wood. The wood I cut down. If you care to take it. Only care was so badly written. It looked like another word. The C was uncommonly like E. That's the copse that spoils my view of the downs, you see. His client explained to him later, pointing across the fields and referring to the ordnance map beside him. I want to cut it down, and a path made so. Fingers indicated directions on the map. The fairywood, it's still called, and it's far older than this house. Come now, you're ready, Mr. Thomas. We might go out and have a look at it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? Boy Soresco. Again, another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled Dagon, written by H.P. Lovecraft. I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more. Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable. I can bear the torture no longer. I shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death. It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell victim to the Germans' derader. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their latter degradation, so that our vessel was made legitimate prize. Whilst we, of her crew, were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners. So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days, I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared. I began to despair in my solitude on the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous. When at last I awaked, it was to discover myself half-sucked to a slimy expanse of hellish black mire which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I can see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished, for there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the undending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black, its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet. As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions which for innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean. Strain my ears I might, nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead thing. For several hours I sat thinking and brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night, I slept but little, and the next day, I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vast sea and possible rescue. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight and evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day, I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation of the rolling desert. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight and evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day, I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert. That night, I encamped. On the following day, still traveled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it. By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. Intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but eerie the waning, and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain. I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon, I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was the source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side to an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had yet soared high enough to illuminate. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into the fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscence of Paradise Lost and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfinished realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing to the Stygian deeps where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself, but I was conscious of the distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express. For despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss that yawned at the bottom of the sea, the world was young. I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith whose massive bulk had known the worship, perhaps the worship, of living and thinking creatures. dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist or archaeologist's delight. I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions, and almost slapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculpture. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphic unknown to me, and unlike anything I had ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound. Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size were an array of bas reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of Dor. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creature was shown disporting like fishes in waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves. Well, of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bluer, they were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands, feet, shockingly wide, flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have seemed chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background, for one of the creatures was shown the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of most erring anthropologists, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, Polyphemus-like, and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head, gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to think. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm some time after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard peals of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe. Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, fish god, but soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries. It is at night, especially when the moon's gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me to its clutches as its hopeless slave. But now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever, as I lay sun-stricken and raving the open boat in my escaped German man of war. This, I ask myself, whatever does there come before me, a hideously vivid vision, in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering the nameless things that at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols, carving their own detestable likenessness on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down in their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind, of a day when the land shall sink, the dark ocean floor shall send amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me, God. That hand, the window. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end. Yo, what is up, everybody? Your boy Esco, back again with another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled The Incident, written by J. King. Remember that all properties and rights belong to their respective authors, so please use the links in the description below. Show love and support to them. Like, comment, and subscribe. Dear Sir, I won't pretend to feel anything other than a deep dread at the receipt of your letter. How you came by my name and of my involvement in the mentioned incident causes me a great deal of consternation, considering the effort I have made over the years to hide my presence at the event. I have heard some tales of you, your position, and capabilities, and therefore find myself obliged to believe that you could easily follow through on your not-so-veiled threats. Though I'll admit that there's not much that could frighten me after that day. As you correctly stated, I was indeed in Vizai when the hikers passed through. After some trouble with the local government in my hometown, I was spending time on the down low, as I understand the expression is. I had not met the group before, but we had the chance to meet during the purchasing of food, and I found them friendly and forthcoming. And I'll admit that their little expedition seemed an enjoyable one to me, though I had not their experience climbing and mountaineering. My hesitation on whether to join them or not originally led me to start out alone on my own journey on a somewhat parallel route, though with a different destination. But I found myself oddly drawn to that intriguingly determined little group, and so eventually changed my mind and my path. They had taken the first part of their journey quite easily, and I was able to catch up with them in the highland area. Around, I believe, the 31st, after Eden had already departed the expedition due to injury. The lone female member of the group, Mila, seemed pleased to have more female company, and the group as a whole welcomed me as a friend. It welcomed my heart. After all, I could have no idea what has to come. The first sign that the journey would not be what we hoped for was the worsening weather conditions. Sharp snowstorms had destroyed our visibility. As a less experienced hiker, I found this quite disconcerting, but the rest of the group were made of sturdier stuff and were not so fazed, even when it transpired that we had become a little lost and had deviated from our path, finding ourselves towards the top of Koalat. They merely decided that we should set up camp, Igor stating that it would be a good practice of slope camping, not wanting to lose the height we had conquered. Oh, that we had been more cautious, been less eager. Despite the presence of women in the group, we shared one tent between the 10 of us, practically being far more important than circumstances and propriety. It was actually Mila that woke up first thing at night. Her movement awakened me. Vita, can you hear that? In the silence of the night, for several moments, all I could hear was the gentle breathing of our companions. And then there was a crunch of snow outside. The sharp noise like a heavy breath of a large animal. A bear, perhaps. Though we were aware nothing like that lived in the area, Mila and I froze. Our eyes locked together, and then she reached over and gripped Igor's arm. His eyes opened blearily and focused on us, and I saw his expression grow puzzled as he watched me press a finger on my lips. He sat up carefully and stared at us, a question on his face. In answer, I just pointed to where the sound seemed to be coming from. It was closer now, and whatever it was seemed to have its face pressed to the sides of the tent, as I could hear it sniffing along the bottom of the material. I was aware of the other members of the group awakening, slowly sitting up, their bodies still and silent, as they heard the thing outside investigating us. I don't know what we all felt at that moment. Some fear, certainly, or perhaps not terror. A large animal does not necessarily mean a predator after all, and our tent was sturdy in any case. I caught Igor's eye, and his calmness soothed me. The thing outside was moving around toward the front of the tent, towards the opening that we believe to be securely tied. And then the noise. Oh God, the noise. I can't describe it fully. Something like a scream, but furious. Somehow high-pitched and shrieking, and yet with some lower rumble of bass that seemed to make the ground shake beneath us. There were cries of fear within the group, and we grasped at each other. At my side, and absolutely terrified, Yuri snatched his knife out of his bag and slashed it through the side of the tent. The slit he made was easily big enough for him to fit through, and he fled out of it, followed quickly by Gregory. As the thing outside pushed against the front of the tent, the rest of us surged forward towards this escape route, briefly bottlenecking while behind us that awful roar grew louder, and then we were free and fleeing down the slopes towards the nearest shelter we could find. I don't know how long we ran, freezing, terrified, pursued by that creature, before we saw the woods ahead of us barreled in. We scrambled into bushes and up trees, breathless and trying to make each other out of the darkness, as well as see if the thing had followed. There was silence around us, and I think we all dared to hope that we had escaped. But whatever elation could have been in store for us was quickly dashed by the realization of our situation. We were outside, the freezing cold, most of us without shoes even, and with no way to find our way back in the dark to our belongings. I'm not sure how long we cowered there before we realized that we were going to have to at least attempt to return back the way we came. Gregory and Yuri were already beginning to succumb to the first signs of hypothermia. I heard Zenaida shushing Yuri, who was shaking violently and hissing about his bare feet. They were hushed discussions of starting a fire, but I think we were scared that it would bring the creature back to us. Igor made the decision that the rest of us would stay in the woods, whilst he, Zenaida, and Rustam would attempt a return to the tent to fetch clothing and provisions. They left soon after. We never saw them again. After several hours, Nikolai urged us to start at least a small fire. We didn't want to lose Yuri and Gregory, who were huddled at the bottom of the pine, deathly pale. Yuri had already tried to remove his clothes once. Mila had managed to stop him. Semyon agreed, and we collected firewood and attempted a blaze. Though, without much luck, they were really managing more than a sputtering failure. And after Yuri suddenly jerked his leg, knocking the fire out, singeing his trousers in the process, despite the bitter weather, we gave up. But you have to be practical in these circumstances. You see, so when Yuri and Gregory were seen not to need them anymore, we took their clothing. Their troubles were over. It was Alexander who first stated that he did not believe that Igor and the others would be returning, and that if we wanted to survive this, we would need to set out on our own. Those of us that remained, myself, Mila, Nikolai, Semyon, had to agree. We were on our own. We set out as carefully and quietly as we could, thinking to follow in the footsteps of Igor and the others and make our way back to the tent. We stayed close together, eyes wide and staring out into the darkness. That we had already lost our way only became apparent when moonlight burst out from behind a cloud and showed down on a gaping ravine, and none of us could remember our flight down from the tent to relative safety. "Do we turn back?" whispered Alexander to the rest of us. But before any of us could answer, Nikolai glanced behind us and let out an awful cry. I don't believe the rest of us looked to see what he had seen. We had a good idea after all, but instead just ran as fast as we could away from it. In the panic, Nikolai, terrified by what he had just seen, stumbled the wrong way, and I saw him disappear over the nearby edge. Mila screamed at that and immediately changed her course to a path that led towards the ravine and down, perhaps, hoping that we could somehow save him. Semyon, Alexander, and I followed her. There was nowhere to hide up there, after all. We ran and slipped our way down to the creek at the bottom, but there was no time to look for Nikolai. The creature had followed us. We could hear its fast footsteps and its grumbling growl. I tried to sneak over a look, and as I ran, I could only make out a shadowy shape in darkness. Our group found itself splitting up, each trying to make a different cover. I saw Mila make for a group of boulders, while I lunged for a large shrub growing stumbly by the freezing water. I didn't see it at the time where Alexander went. Once hidden, I turned to see if the creature had seen me. Might perhaps even now be bearing down on me, but it was not. Semyon had slipped in the water and was trying to drag himself away. I could hear his whimpering cries from where I hid. I could also see the creature for the first time. It was tall and thin, human-like, I guess, but wrong in too many ways. In the moonlight, I could make out unnaturally long limbs, jutting bones. His face wasn't too clear, though I thought I could make out dark holes where his eyes and mouth might be. It was bearing down on Simeon, who had twisted around to face his attacker. Brave man. The thing leaned down towards him and screamed. The noise was worse than before, again with that strange split of high and low resonance. With wide eyes, I saw Simeon's face contort in pain, and then I looked away, squeezing my eyes shut. I heard a dull crack, like the crunch of bones, and then silence. I peered out. Simeon was slumped back in the water. Dead, I had no doubt. The thing was standing where I had seen it last, its back to me. It was unnaturally still, like a statue. I glanced over to the boulders where I had seen Mila and saw her peeping out as I was, her eyes on the monster. I realized immediately that she intended to run. Her cover was not as good as mine, and it was apparent to her, as to me, that if the creature turned her way, she would not be hidden. She moved carefully back. Whether the creature had supernatural hearing or some other unknown sense, it turned immediately. Those dark holes of eyes seeking the out. He screamed and turned to run. But good God, it moved so fast, those freakish limbs eating up the ground between them. Spidery hands grabbing her arms and pulling her up in the air. For a second, it just stared at her face as she writhed in its grip, and then it gave its banshee wail. This time, I didn't look away, though sheer terror had purged much of what I saw from my mind. But before I fainted, I remember seeing her eyes and how they poured down her face. How I survived until morning, I'll never know. Though 3 fingers and most of my toes were the price I paid to the cold. I was luckier though than Alexander, who I found further down the creek, frozen, face down in the water, as it lapped gently against him. Of the creature, there was no sign. I made no attempt to return to the tent and would have likely perished like my companions, and I had not eventually stumbled upon a somewhat shocked tribe of Mansi, who saved my life and to whom I am forever indebted. Until today, I have never shared this story. My status as a fugitive from the law would have made me unwilling to divulge my involvement, even if the story had not been so unbelievable. The government so eager to cover up what aspects of it as they could. Though mostly it is because I do not wish to relive it, I have such nightmares as it is, of the creature, of Mila's face, and of the details I learned later from the investigation. The families don't need to know what truly occurred. Let them believe it was just an unfortunate accident. I know enough of you, sir, to have no reason to believe in your goodness, but I am an old woman now who is not likely to see many more summers. If I could prevail on you to keep this account hidden until I am no longer around to confirm or deny it, then you would be doing me great kindness. Let the world go on without knowing there was a 10th member of that team. It has passed into legend without me. Let the dead rest, sir. Though from what I know of you, I fear my pleas fall on deaf ears. Yours, Elizaveta Okolova. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? It's your boy Ceresco, back again with a slightly different horror story for you guys. This was not the usual, ghouls, ghosts, spirit type thing, but I did want to try a little bit something different. Definitely let me know what you guys think. Use the links in the description to show love and support to the author, Seth Paul. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. The following is transcribed from a document located in an unmarked grave discovered and exhumed on the island of Skellig Michael. The document is of particular note because not only does it predate the monastic orders that would come to dominate the culture of this Irish property, but was confusing due to the occasional lapse of the author into an unknown language, later determined to Frankish writing from the 4th century and onwards. It was originally wondered how or why a speaker of a Germanic language would have found their way to such a remote spot, hundreds of miles away from what was surely the place of his birth. But as the translation unfolded, the more unusual the story became. It is presented here without further comment. May perhaps here, in my final resting place, on this island far from the reaches of all I have ever known and loved, will my story come to a peaceful end. Know that my name is Adewolf, and my brother Erhard, and may the first of these I not speak again. For it is in my name that much of what has transpired has happened, and that it is fitting that I write these words in a foreign tongue that still gives me difficulty, for I truly deserve to be a stranger in a strange land. This island overlooks a rough and angry sea. The sea was never a place I imagined for a home, nor Erhard, for we were born in what the Romans called Germania, and in that place, a fishing lake was perhaps the largest body of water we had ever seen. We were not fishers ourselves, but hunters, using bow and arrow, knife and trap to catch our daily meals. I wish I could say we were good lads, but my current state ensures that such a thing is not the case. Our clan traveled often, with little possessions to call our own, and we went as the seasons bade us to travel. In winter, we would head as far towards warmer climes as we could, but many others outside of our clan would often do the same. And if we did not heed warnings soon enough, there would be little space to live and hunt without quarrel and violence. If we were larger in size, both number and body, perhaps we could have held out. But proud as we were, we could not hope to compete in such an instance, and we often wintered further north. We were lucky in that deer would be left behind as well, but boars also gave us trouble, even if the meat was often worth the risk. We were both young men, Earhart and I, in the year when our lives would change forever. The winter snows had melted, and the cold bite of winter gave way to the wet coolness of springtime. Grumblings began to spread of discontent and the potential of open warfare among the clans, as Harald, a leader of the southern region, felt he was not being given the tribute he deserved. It was believed he wished to prove his point on the end of a sword. Though we had learned much about hunting game, we found ourselves conscripted into the hunting of men. Our skills proved quite useful in training, and then when Harald finally did make his move, proved even more useful in defense. The Romans preferred their open warfare, and on the field, full of colors and the honor of combat in regalia. We preferred not to play that game, but to hunt as we did game, striking the enemy and retreating, avoiding being seen at all costs. There were forests Harald's forces dare not enter. We never wanted to admit anything as strong as pride, but to strike fear into Harald did leave us with a leap in our stomachs. To think, even if we were not well known, our skills certainly were. Earhart, on the other hand, drew to enjoy his life far more than I. He was younger, more brash, more desirous to prove his worth. But at the same time, he was the one who was closest to giving us away more than one occasion. A dropped arrow here, a kicked rock there, shifting slightly and sending wildlife scurrying for cover. These were the kinds of things that almost, but not truly, put us in danger. And he never learned from his mistakes. Still, there was no denying his tracking abilities. The way he followed both deer and man alike were outstanding. Though it was me, but more capable of hiding, waiting for something to happen. I had patience, he did not. Our blessings of Providence finally did leave us, just as the chill of winter once again descended upon us. We had received word that another convoy of soldiers were to head west through the woods we knew so well, and we prepared ourselves for the occasion. Earhart found them when they entered and tracked their way through. They decided to take a well-trodden footpath, a foolhardy thing to do. And once he had followed them and knew what route they would take, we took up hiding places in trees that lined the small valley where a brook babbled through. The water had worn down and into a thin path, shallow enough to wade, but once in, the only way to travel was to follow the river to its conclusion. The walls were too tall and sandy to make climbing out a possibility. Nobody with any sense, knowing it was hostile territory, would ever have attempted it. We should have realized that there was something wrong with all of this. But as I said, we were young, and despite our skills, we were only human, and naive to the idea that anyone would ever try to lure us into the open. It all went wrong when Earhart, sitting in the crotch of a tree, kicked some bark loose, and then the arrow whistled from across the way, and I heard him gasp before they fell 10 feet to the ground. Within seconds, the convoy was upon them, but not as I feared to simply run him through the end with his life here and there. No, they lifted him to a standing position. At some distance away, the other archer came from the woods. A much older man, neither of us, with many battle scars around his face and eyes, and the heavy gray beard was still allowed to grow on his damaged jaw. I waited, frozen, watching it all from a distance, as one of the convoy unfurled a scroll and began reading off a list of crimes Earhart had supposedly committed. At least they would only be considered crimes if Harold became the overlord he so desired to be. But Earhart ignored their questions, their attempts to mock him. There were very few of them, and they did not seem to be aware that the threat of the forest came from at the two archers, not one. They paid no attention to the idea that they might still be in danger. But a flight from my arrows never came. I did not know then why I hesitated. I believe in a sense it was fear. In another, it was sort of punishment for Earhart. A chance to learn his carelessness would someday get us all killed if he did not change. I watched as they led him further into the woods, away from my position. I followed after, not quite as good as a tracker as my brother, but not wanting to lose sight of him. They headed along the brook as expected, but then made a turn where the water split into two paths, and followed this smaller branch as the water continued to dry up. Slow, turned brown, but oddly opened up further until they reached a small wooden copse. It was not a clearing, for there was still plenty of trees to block view, no matter where I tried to keep an eye out. But the only rear feature of any note was the back. The thick, marshy surface disappearing away into the distance. We didn't like to be out near this spot. We could at all. We never knew the names of. Whether it was the stories, or perhaps just a feeling, or even something malevolent in its place, but the bog carried an aura, a sense of great loneliness. It was dangerous enough to wade in as it stood, without any sordid history to worry about, but the sorrow and misery that poured from it only made it all the more wretched. I once again told my brother to confess to his crimes. Earhart refused to answer them, except when asked to name others who helped him on his work. He never mentioned me. He allowed them to believe he was the only one. I think deep down he expected me to do what he likely would have done, and taken on the troops with a few well-placed arrows and rescue him at the last minute. But they never gave him the chance. They bound his hands, his feet, and placed a small crooked cap on his head. They led him close to the edge of the bog and forced him to kneel, facing all, and in the bargain, me. I think as they then tightened a noose around his neck. He must have seen me, known I was there, and wondered why I did nothing to rescue him in his last few moments of life. The noose tightened, and as I watched, they each took turns pulling it, squeezing the life from him. First, his face turned purple, then blue, and then grew paler and more lifeless. The archer took the final turn, whispering something into Erhard's ear, pulling so hard the rope almost split in two. He held it the longest. I do not know how the time was, but I felt tears well as my younger brother's tongue could no longer fit in his mouth, and he finally collapsed on the ground. His burial was very unceremonial. A crew of soldiers lifted his corpse and dropped it into the bog, with little to no fanfare. With that accomplished, they rested for a short while, then gathered their belongings and went on with their lives. But mine would never be the same again. My brother was gone, in such a short time, and in much pain and anguish, and I did nothing to help him. Fortunately for the clan, my services in the fight would not be required after that. Harold, a few days later, was assassinated by his own men, due to the combination of not paying them for their services, as well as a growing discontentment for his future plans. A relative peace covered the land, and due to both that and my own desire to retreat, I was able to find solace in solitude and many a drink. More years passed, and as time passed, I found a greater desire to move further west, to leave behind Germania and anything which reminded me of my past guilt. I was able to obtain several small jobs, avoiding debt and slavery, and being able to support myself to a comfortable degree. Though I was still never inclined to stay in one place for very long. It is by sheer coincidence that I found myself in the company of men I thought I would never, in my wildest dreams, be again. At first, I did not recognize him, as he was wearing the same murky clothing in which he had distinguished himself all those years ago. Just a simple white cloak with a hood. But as I walked through the marketplace, I heard his voice ordering a small bag of food. My mind made a connection to the voice that had pulled the life from my brother. I glanced in his direction, thinking it was just a trick of the mind. But it was no trick. A scarred jaw, now exploding with beard, he had decided not to keep shaven, was unmistakably his. I followed him, expecting to see him now stationed in luxury and comfort, his reward for what he had completed. Instead, he appeared to have found himself a small set of rooms, located in the district of the city, in the area where the lepers sought a coin and some pity. Having now seen where he lived, I fell back into old habits and began to watch him, waiting for him, as I would pray in the forest, hoping to find the moment in which I could spring on him ready to destroy his life the way he destroyed mine. But though his was an easy pattern to follow, it was also confusing. He did not appear to be comfortable in life, but looked over his shoulder, frightened, as if expecting something to come by and attack him. He did not expect me, but why would he? He had no idea who I was, not knowing my brother was not alone in those woods. But certainly, something was off about him and his life. I finally secured an evening in which he had drunk himself into a stupor. And though he wandered back to the shack he called his house, he had no visitors, no witnesses, and none who sat outside his house begging for scraps. And as he went into and attempted to bar the door, I pushed my way in, both surprising him and ensuring he could not get any weapons in time. I struck him until he fell unconscious, then tied him to a chair with some bowstring cards I had located among his things. When he awoke, I questioned him, wanting to know as much as I could about him before I would end his life, bringing some peace from my brother's murder. The answers I got, however, turned my view of the past few years into a sort of reflection. He had been hired that day by the convoy, a sort of mercenary among mercenaries, and of the 15 to 20 that had succeeded in killing Earhart, he was the only one remaining. The rest had all vanished, either simply disappearing into thin air or found dead, disfigured and strangled. No murderer was ever caught, but the archer told me that he knew who the killer was. He's some kind of man, but he cannot die. He will not die. I know, for I shot and stabbed him myself. Did not even make a noise when he was hurt. He just kept coming. I needed to know more about this man who had tried to kill. But he told me nothing. I now understood why he was so frightened, but knowing so little gave me no clue as to who followed him. I wanted him as dead as I. So I left him tied up in his home and waited to see who would come. He screamed and yelled, telling me I was leaving him for dead. I don't think he realized how little I cared for his well-being. I watched across the street and waited, and sometime in the late evening, the murderer came to call. But to call what I saw, man, stretched the meaning of the word. Something arrived that night, looking for revenge, though it was impossibly thin. Its arms and legs shrunken and gangly. In no way something a living person could have even won is not eaten in some time. He slithered into an open window, and after I heard the scream of the archer as he saw his death coming for him, I approached, kicking in the door. But the archer had come too late. His chair lay sideways, his body sprawled, his eyes bulging and windpipe crushed, twitching in death throes. But the shrunken, hideous figure that had done him in turned to me as I entered, and even in its deformed state, I recognized the face in moments. My brother stared back at me, or what remained of him. He stood before me, wearing nothing but the tattered remains of the pointed hat. But modesty was not necessary at this point, for his body was what of a dry, dissected corpse, tainted brown by the time spent in the bog swamp. Though dried out and colored the same as the slab of salted meat, his face remained almost a mirror image of the one I had seen prior to death. But even in the dark, his eyes glinted a yellow color, similar to that of a domestic cat in the moonlight. I recoiled, slamming the door behind me, and ran. See, I have continued to run since that day. I know that though his direct murderers have suffered justice at his hands, I know that he still blames me for what happened that day. And whatever animates him cannot rest until I am ready to join him. It has been quite an adventure though. I have traveled, I have seen much of the world I did not expect to see. I know he pursues me, having seen him in my travels out of the corner of my eye, leaving before he can track me down completely. Just as we did as young men, he pursues and tracks with expert skill. But I can hide. I can certainly hide. But perhaps I finally eluded him. I had traveled to this land, away from the world I once knew, having learned the barbaric tongue of these northern lands, and have sought out the deepest places of loneliness. And having crossed the channel twice, I finally arrived here at this island. None but a few bardic groups come here, and even then with great difficulty. Even someone as dedicated as him cannot come here, as I would see him coming. Only by Bor could he arrive, and only then the waves did not destroy him first. Surely the forces of nature could destroy what remained of him. Even so, I believe I will succeed, that I will elude him. For I have developed a cough accompanied by blood and a general weakening of my body and spirit. I cannot run any further. I will not survive another trip. But despite being far from my home in this place, I believe the peace I seek will soon come. I will die, and my brother's revenge will no longer be necessary, and perhaps in the world beyond this one, we shall meet again as friends. I have prepared a burial site for myself. When it is time, I shall lay within and let my life ebb away. This story shall accompany me, and you should read of it. Know that I regret my actions toward my own kin, but his forgiveness to his, not mine to ask, and I hope we may both be judged for it when I awake from this world. Now, ladies and gentlemen, yo, what is up, everybody? It's your boy Ceresco, back again with another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled The Secret Tunnel, written by Jonah and Craig Groshek. I'm gonna use the links in the description below. Show love to them, like, comment, and subscribe. The air in the Rockies had a way of slipping into your lungs, cool and clean. before settling into your chest. Eric drew in a long breath, savoring it. His hiking boots crunched over a gravel-strewn path as he wound his way through the woods near Estes Park, trying to convince himself this solo trip was a good idea. A few days away from the noise of his job and the silent, yawning emptiness of his apartment, that was the plan. Clear his head, find some meaning in the rhythm of nature, but so far, the trip had offered more solitude than solace. He was rounding a bend in the trail when the sound stopped him. A voice, littling and bright, was singing a strange, repetitive tune. Secret tunnel, through the mountains, secret tunnel. Eric froze. It wasn't the sort of thing you expected to hear out here, far from town. The voice sounded young, like a child's, and it was moving closer. Hello? Eric called, shading his eyes against the late afternoon sun. The boy emerged from the trees, as if conjured. He was small, no more than 9 or 10, with sandy brown hair and a mischievous grin. He wore a red windbreaker zipped up halfway, and his sneakers were caked in mud. Hey there, that song you're singing. The boy gave him a look that could only be described as incredulous, as if Eric had just asked him to explain why the sky was blue. It's about a secret tunnel. Right. But what kind of tunnel? A real one or something you made up? The boy's grin widened, revealing a gap where one of his front teeth should have been. There was something off about the way he smirked, something too knowing for a kid's age. Let me show you. Eric hesitated, glancing back toward the trail he'd been following. The safety of the marked path felt suddenly distant. I don't know. I should probably stick to my hike. Don't be scared. Just look over here. He started walking, now waiting to see if Eric would follow. Eric shifted uncontrollably. This was stupid. He didn't know this kid, didn't know where he was going, but curiosity has teeth, and it sank into him before he could think better of it. Against his better judgment, he stepped off the trail and followed. The boy led him deeper into the woods, where the trees stood taller and closer together, their shadows weaving to a dark canopy. Eric's nerves prickled with every step. He tried to make conversation to ease the tension. So, do you live around here? Kinda. What's your name? The boy didn't answer, just kept walking, his sneakers squelching softly in the dirt. Eric's grip tightened on the strap of his backpack. This was a bad idea. He needed to turn around, go back to the main trail. But just as the thought crystallized, the boy stopped. Here. The boy gestured toward a moss-covered rock rising out of the forest floor. At first glance, it looked solid, but as Eric stepped closer, he noticed a narrow opening partially hidden by a tangle of roots and vines. Is this a secret tunnel? The boy finished the thought. Eric crouched to peer into the entrance. The darkness inside was thick, swallowing the faint light that managed to slip past the roots. He could just make out the start of stone steps descending into the earth. You've been in there before? Yeah, it's cool, you'll like it. Eric's mouth felt dry. Every instinct screamed at him to back away, to head back to the trail and forget this weird encounter. But when he looked at the boy, he saw no malice, just that devilish grin. Why would anyone want to go down there? It makes you happy. Eric stared into the blackness of the tunnel. The boy's words echoed into his ears. It makes you happy, makes you happy, makes you happy. Something about the way he said it tugged at Eric's mind. A mixture of promise and something darker. All right, Eric said, more to himself than the boy. His legs felt heavy as he crouched to step through the opening. The air changed the moment he entered. The temperature dropped sharply, the earthy scent of moss replaced by a metallic tang. His flashlight illuminated roughly carved walls, the stone worn smooth in places as if touched by countless hands. The boy's footsteps were light behind him, and the sound made Eric flinch. You coming? Of course. Eric took his first step. The stone was damp and cold beneath his boots. The echo of his footfalls sounded impossibly loud. The staircase descended sharply, as if they went deeper. The faint glimmers of light from the entrance faded into nothing. How far does this go? Not too far. You'll see. The tunnel seemed endless, each step taking them further into the impenetrable darkness. The walls were closer now, and Eric's shoulders almost brushed damp stone. His flashlight revealed strange marks carved into the walls. Symbols he didn't recognize, jagged and angular, like something you see in an old textbook on ancient civilizations. You know who made these? They've always been here. Eric paused, turning to look at the boy. His flashlight beam caught the boy's face. The boy's sandy hair was matted with sweat, and his skin seemed oddly pale, almost translucent. The grin was still there, but his eyes didn't seem to reflect the light. I think I've gone far enough. Oh, come on, we're almost there. Don't you want to be happy? Eric opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. His flashlight flickered, plunging them into brief darkness. When the beam returned, the walls seemed closer, the symbols somehow sharper and more menacing. A rhythmic sound started softly, so faint that Eric wasn't sure he'd heard it at all. But as they descended further, it grew louder. A deep, low vibration that seemed to come from the stone itself. Do you hear that? The boy didn't answer. just started humming the same tune. Secret tunnel, secret tunnel. Eric pressed ahead, his movements more hurried, as if rushing would make the unease disappear. The staircase finally ended, opening into a narrow corridor. The walls here were different, polished to a mirror-like finish. Eric's reflection stared back at him in the weak light, his features distorted by the curvature of the stone. This is crazy. What's even down here? You'll see. You'll see. Eric followed reluctantly. The corridor's smooth walls amplifying every sound. The scuff of his boots, his breathing, the faint hum of the boy's song. The air was different here, heavier, carrying an almost electric charge that raised the hairs on Eric's arms. The vibrations grew stronger. Eric stopped abruptly, placing a hand against the wall to steady himself. Is it just me or ground moving? Nah, you're just nervous. It's normal. Eric's flashlight flickered again, and this time, it didn't recover. He smacked it against his palm, and the beam stayed dead. Hey, wait! But before Eric could finish, the boy stepped ahead, disappearing into the darkness. Hey! Eric called, panic creeping into his voice. He fumbled with his flashlight, desperate to coax it back to life. Come on, you're so close. Don't stop now. Eric clenched his jaw and pressed on. He kept one hand on the wall, using it to guide himself through the suffocating blackness. Suddenly, the corridor opened up, and Eric stumbled into a vast chamber. Eric staggered forward as the chamber stretched into focus. His first thought was that it shouldn't exist, not this far underground. The wall soared higher than the beam of any flashlight could reach, curving into an impossibly domed ceiling. Giant stone pillars, thick as redwoods, dotted the space, etched with more of those strange symbols. In the center of a chamber was a pool. It glowed faintly, the light rippling across the stone floor in patterns that seemed to move of their own accord. The liquid within shimmered unnaturally, shifting between colors, deep greens, molten golds, and blood reds. Eric felt a pull, something primal and magnetic that drew him toward it. He resisted, planting his feet. What is this place? It's where the tunnel leads. Eric turned to him sharply. The boy's appearance had shifted again, subtly, unmistakably. His skin seemed to sag, and his hair had thinned into wisps. His grin was wider now, his teeth faintly yellowed. You look different. It happens. The vibration Eric had felt earlier were stronger here. They were seemingly coming from the pool. He could hear faint whispers now, voices that didn't belong to him. They grew louder as he stared at the shifting liquid. It's beautiful, isn't it? The boy's voice had changed, deeper, more mature. What is it? It's happiness. What? Everything you've ever wanted. Every regret gone. Every bad memory erased. All you have to do, step in. The words were soft, almost hypnotic. Eric felt his feet move forward the pool without thinking. But he stopped himself, shaking his head. This isn't right. No. What's in there? What does it do? It makes you happy. There was something sinister in his tone now, and Eric's stomach churned. He took another step back, his eyes darting around the chamber. And that's when he saw them. Figures, barely more than shadows, dung to the edges of the chamber. At first, Eric thought they were just carvings. Their limbs were too long, their bodies grotesquely thin. And then one moved, its head tilting unnaturally toward him. Who are they? They were like you. The thing stepped closer, revealing a face stretched tight over a skull-like structure. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. Eric stumbled back, nearly losing his footing. The boy's laughter echoed through the chamber, sharp and mocking. They wanted to be happy too. They gave themselves to the pool. Now they belong here. Eric's head swam as the whispers grew louder, overlapping in a chaotic symphony. The figures advanced slowly, their movements jerky and unnatural. This is insane. What are you? I'm the guide. I bring people here. That's all. Eric's flashlight flickered to life suddenly, and he swung it toward the boy. The light struck his face, and Eric gasped. The boy's skin was peeling, his features barely holding together. His eyes glowed faintly, and his grin extended for past the boundaries of a human mouth. His body convulsed, bones cracking and reshaping. Why are you doing this? Because you came. You all came. Eric's panic rose as the figures closed in, their hollow eyes fixed on him. He glanced at the pool, its glowing pulsing more urgently now, the whisper rising to a fever pitch. Step in, Eric. You'll understand. You'll feel it. Happiness like nothing you'll ever know. Eric's knees buckled. The pull toward the pool grew stronger, almost unbearable, as though invisible hands were dragging him forward. No! He yelled, forcing himself upright. He turned and sprinted back toward the tunnel as the whispers transformed into screams. Eric's boots pounded against the stone floor as he sprinted back toward the tunnel. The screams followed him, bouncing off the walls in unnatural echoes that seemed to come from every direction. His flashlight flickered wildly, casting shadows that danced and wreathed. The air in the corridor grew heavier with each step, thick and metallic, burning his lungs as he fought to keep moving. Behind him, the boy's distorted voice rang out, high-pitched and mocking. You can't leave. Nobody ever leaves. Eric didn't look back. His legs burned as he climbed the carved steps, his hands scraping against the rough stone walls to keep his balance. Meanwhile, the vibrations underfoot grew even stronger, shaking the tunnel as though the earth itself were angry. He risked a glance over his shoulder and instantly regretted it. The boy, or what was left of him, was bounding up the steps on all fours, his limbs twisted at unnatural angles. His face had peeled away unnaturally, revealing something insectoid and glistening underneath. Behind him, the shadowy figures swarmed, their elongated arms clawing at the walls as they climbed. Eric pushed himself harder, adrenaline drowning out the pain in his legs. The tunnel seemed endless, carved steps stretching into infinity. His mind reeled as panic clawed at him. The boy's voice rang out again, now layered with an unearthly resonance. It's too late. The tunnel chose you. No! No! Eric screamed. He forced his body forward, each step feeling heavier than the last. The flashlight died completely, plunging him into total darkness. Blind now, Eric relied on his memory of the path, his hands scraping along the walls to guide him. The whispers started again, softer but more insidious, weaving promises into his ears. He can have it all. No more pain. Happiness forever. Shut up, shut up. The air suddenly shifted, and Eric felt a breeze against his face. He wasn't imagining it. The entrance was close. He surged forward, his fingers clawing at the walls until he felt the jagged edges of the tunnel's opening. Eric scrambled out of the tunnel and collapsed onto the rocky ground outside. The sunlight burned his eyes, and he gasped for air, a clean, crisp scent of pine almost overwhelming after the suffocating stench below. But he didn't have time to rest. The vibrations hadn't stopped. The tunnel behind them pulsed with an unnatural energy, the rock wall trembling as though something massive was pressing against it from the inside. Eric staggered his feet, backing away. He grabbed a large rock and heaved it toward the tunnel entrance. Then another, and another. He worked frantically, piling stones and debris in front of the opening till it was completely blocked. The vibrations subsided. The whispers faded. For a moment, there was silence. Eric collapsed against a tree, his chest heaving. The boy's voice didn't come again. The figures didn't follow. He was safe. Or so he thought. 2 days later, Eric sat in a coffee shop in Estes Park, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee. His hands trembled as he scrolled through photos on his phone, his mind replaying the horrors of the tunnel. He had tried to tell people what had happened, but no one believed him. You saw what? A secret tunnel? Monsters? Look, these mountains are full of strange caves and old mining shafts, but nothing like what you're describing. Now, Eric stared blankly at the table, trying to convince himself it had all been a bad dream, a nightmare. Maybe he'd imagined the whole thing. The faint sound of a child's laughter pulled him from his thoughts. He looked up sharply, scanning the room. At a table near the window sat a boy with sandy brown hair. It couldn't be him. It was impossible. But then the boy turned, meeting Eric's eyes. His grin widened, impossibly large, as he raised a hand and waved. Eric's blood turned to ice. He fumbled for his phone, knocking over his coffee in the process. When he looked up again, the boy was gone. On the table where the boy had been sitting was a small note. Eric hesitated, then reached for it, his hands shaking. The paper was worn and yellow, the edges frayed. In crude, childlike handwriting, it read, "You'll be back. Everyone always comes back." The note slipped from Eric's fingers as the whispers began again. Faint, but unmistakable. Secret tunnel through the mountains. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end. Yo, what is up, everybody? It's your boy Ceresco, back again with another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled The Wishing Well, written by Craig Roshek. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to them. Like, comment, and subscribe. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the trees on Harold's rural property. It was an evening like any other, the kind Harold had grown accustomed to since his wife, Henrietta, passed away 12 years ago. These walks had become a routine, a way to fill the silence that now defined his life. The air was cool, the woods quiet. Too quiet, Harold thought. The birds had stopped singing, and even the wind seemed to have died down, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. He shook off the unease creeping into his thoughts and pressed on, following the familiar path that wound deeper to the forest. That's when the fog rolled in. It came fast, thick and white, swallowing the trees and the path in a matter of moments. Harold stopped, squinting into the haze. He had never seen fog like this before. Not here, not anywhere. It was so dense that he couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. A cold knot of unease settled in his gut, but he brushed it aside. Fog was just fog after all. He kept walking, slower now, his steps more cautious. But as quickly as it had appeared, the fog began to lift. Harold blinked, disoriented. The path was still there, the trees still looming overhead. But something was different. A clearing had appeared where there hadn't been one before. In the center of that stood a well. Harold stopped in his tracks. The well was old, made of crumbling bricks, with a rusty pulley system and a frayed rope hanging down to the darkness below. He knew this forest like the back of his hand, and he was certain there had never been a well here. It didn't make any sense. He approached it cautiously, his instincts screaming, turn back. But his curiosity got the better of him. Peering over the edge, he saw nothing but blackness. There was no water, no bottom. It's an empty void. The air around the well was cool, almost cold, and Harold felt a shiver run down his spine. Something about the well felt wrong. But instead of leaving, he found himself reaching for the rope. The fibers were rough against his skin, and the pulley squealed loudly as he began to lower the bucket. The sound grated on his nerves, but he kept going until he heard the bucket hit the bottom with a dull thud. It was dry, no splash of water, no echo from the depths. Harold frowned. He began pulling the bucket back up, expecting to find it empty. Instead, there was a scrap of paper inside, along with a small, wore-down pencil. He unfolded the paper, his hands shaking slightly, and read the single line scrawled across in jagged, uneven handwriting. What do you want most in this world? Harold stared at the words, his mind racing. Was this some kind of joke? It had to be, but who would play a joke like this out here in the middle of nowhere? He glanced around, but there was no one. Just the trees, fading light, and the well. His heart ached as he thought of Henrietta. It had been 12 years, but the pain of losing her hadn't dulled. If anything, it had only grown sharper with time. He missed her more than words could express. Without really thinking about it, Harold flipped the paper over and wrote his answer on the back. I want to see my wife again. The pencil felt heavy in his hand, the words even more so. What was he doing? This was ridiculous. And yet, there was a part of him, small, desperate part, that clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, something would happen. He put the note back in the bucket and lowered it to the well. The rope slipped through his fingers. Halfway down, the bucket dropped suddenly, the rope going slack. Harold's heart skipped a beat. Had he broken it? But the tension returned, and he pulled the bucket back up. When it emerged from the darkness, Harold's breath caught in its throat. Next to his own words, a single response had been added, hastily scrawled in the same jagged script. Tonight. He stared at the note, his mind struggling to process what it meant. Tonight? Was this some kind of sick joke? But who could have done this? And how? A cold fear began to creep over him. The woods, once so familiar, now felt foreign, even hostile. The air seemed colder, the shadows darker. His hands shook as he folded the note and shoved it to his pocket. He didn't know what he had done, but he knew it was something he shouldn't have. The walk back to his house felt longer than usual. The trees pressing in on him from all sides. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, following him through the woods. When he finally reached his front door, he nearly was out of breath, though he hadn't been walking any faster than usual. Inside, the house was as quiet as ever. He lit a fire in the fireplace, trying to chase away the chill that had settled to his bones. But he couldn't get warm, no matter how close he sat to the flames. He kept thinking about the note, the word "tonight" echoing in his mind. Harold sat in his favorite chair, a photo of Henrietta on the table side. He stared at it, his heart heavy with longing and fear. What had he done? What's going to happen tonight? As the hours ticked by, the fire burned down to embers, and Harold's eyelids grew heavy. He fought to stay awake, but the exhaustion finally claimed him, and he drifted off to sleep, the note still clutched in his hand. It was the knocking that woke him, sharp and insistent. Harold jerked awake, disoriented, fire nearly out. He frowned, trying to shake off the lingering fog of sleep. Who will be knocking at this hour? He checked the clock, 3 a.m. The knocking came again, this time, and Harold's heart began to race. He stood up slowly, his joints protesting, and moved toward the door. As he approached, he saw a shadow through the frosted glass, a figure standing just outside. A figure that matched Henrietta's height. Harold froze, his breath catching in his throat. He looked down and saw, through the gap under his door, a pair of shoes. Henrietta's shoes. The one he was buried in. Panic surged through him. This wasn't right. This was not natural. The knocking grew more insistent, and then he heard a voice. A voice that was unmistakably Henrietta's, but wrong somehow. The words were short, stilted, and forced through what sounded like cracked, dry lips. Harold, open the door. Harold's blood ran cold. He backed away from the door, his mind racing. He wanted to see her again, but not like this. Not like this. He had to get out now. Moving as quickly as his old legs would allow, Harold made his way to the back of the house, through the kitchen and down into the cellar. His hands trembled as he fumbled with the latch on the cellar door. finally forcing it open and stepping out to the cold night air. From the shadows, he could see the front of the house, the figure still standing at the door. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to get a better look. For what he saw filled him with horror. It was Henrietta, or what was left of her. Her skin was pale and stiff, with the unmistakable sheen of embalming fluid. Her movements were jerky, unnatural, as if she were a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. Her eyes, oh, those beautiful eyes that he loved so much, were gone, replaced by dark, hollow sockets. Harold's stomach turned. This wasn't his wife. It was something else. Something that had taken her place, using her body like a grotesque mask. He needed to get away, but as he turned to flee, his foot caught on a coil of rope left lying on the ground, and he fell hard, pain shooting up his leg as his ankle twisted beneath him. He bit back a cry of pain, but it was too late. The figure had heard him. It turned, its head jerking unnaturally in its direction, and began to move toward Harold, its stiff limbs creaking with every step. Harold, why are you running? The voice was closer now. The panic that had been simmering in Harold's chest finally boiled over. He scrambled to his feet, pain be damned, and hobbled fast as he could towards his truck. But when he reached it, he realized with a sinking feeling that his keys were still inside the house, right where the thing that used to be his wife was now standing. His breath came in short, panic gasped as he backed away from the truck, knowing he had no choice but to run. The figure, Henrietta's corpse, was moving faster now, a low, guttural cry escaping its throat. Harold turned, fled into the woods, his twisted ankle throbbing with every step. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed to get away. And as he limped through the darkened forest, the well's presence loomed in his mind. It had caused this. Maybe it could stop it too. Harold pushed through the underbush, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Every step sent a sharp pain shooting from up twisted ankle. But he didn't dare slow down. The woods, once familiar and comforting, now felt alien, the shadows deeper and more menacing. And behind him, he could hear the relentless pursuit. Henrietta, or what was left of her, rustling through the trees, her stiff, jerky movements growing louder as she closed the distance between them. He needed to reach the well. It was the only thing that might offer a way out of this nightmare. The idea of returning to that cursed well filled him with dread, but desperation fueled his steps. If the well had brought Henrietta back, maybe it could undo the horror he had unleashed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Harold stumbled to the clearing. The well stood there, ancient and foreboding, its dark mouth gaping open like an entrance to the underworld. Harold's breath came in panic as he approached, his body trembling with fear and exhaustion. The bucket was already on its way up, the rope moving as if pulled by unseen hands. Harold's heart pounded in his chest as he grabbed the rope, helping it along. Through his hands were slick with sweat. And when the bucket emerged from the darkness, Harold's stomach churned with dread, because inside was another note, rolled tightly like a scroll, with a small match tied to it. And his hands shook as he took the note and unrolled it. The words inside were simple, but they sent a chill down his spine. "Are you satisfied?" Harold's mind raced. Satisfied? With what? The abomination that had once been his beloved wife? A grotesque parody of life that now stalked him through the woods? His heart clenched with regret as he thought of how much he missed Henrietta, and how much he wished he had never answered that first note. This was not what he wanted. This was a nightmare. He flipped the note over, and with a worn-down pencil stub still in the bucket, scribbled a frantic reply. "No, stop it." He placed the note back in the bucket and lowered it into the well, the pulling squealing as it descended. The sound of Henrietta's movements in the woods grew louder, closer, and Harold's heart raced. The bucket hit the bottom of the well, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then slowly, the rope began to move again, the bucket climbing back up toward him. When he reached to the top, Harold pulled it up with trembling hands. He grabbed the note, his pulse pounding in his ears, and unrolled it. His breath caught in his throat as he read the single word written there. No. Panic surged through him. No? The well was refusing to do what he asked? He looked around, the darkness pressing in on him. The rustling of the trees grew louder as Henrietta drew nearer. He was out of time. In desperation, Harold scribbled one final plea on the back of the note. "Please stop it," as he moved to place the note back in the bucket. The pulley suddenly snapped with a loud crack. The bucket tumbled into the well, disappearing to the darkness below with a final echoing crash. Harold stared in horror at the frayed rope, his last hope unraveling before his eyes. The well was broken, the bucket gone. He couldn't send the note back, couldn't plead for mercy. He was trapped with the thing that had once been his wife. closing in. He leaned over the edge of the well and, unsure what else to do, dropped a note into the abyss. He watched as it fluttered down, disappearing into the darkness. Harold's heart pounded in his chest, strained to listen, hoping, praying that something would happen. But instead of silence, Harold heard something else. A sound that chilled him to the bone. Something climbing up the walls of the well, its claws scraping against the bricks. The noise was wet and sickening, like nails on a chalkboard, mixed with the sound of tearing flesh. Harold stumbled back from the edge, his breath coming in short, panic bursts. His mind screaming at him to run, but his body was frozen in place, paralyzed by the sheer terror of what he knew was coming. Then, slowly, a gnarled, clawed hand reached over the edge of the well. It was covered in blood, and the skin ragged, torn. A second hand followed, gripping the stones with sickening strength. Harold's mouth went dry as he watched, too horrified to move. The message was written in blood, not lead, and it was clear, direct, and final. Join me. Harold's knees buckled, and he nearly collapsed under the weight of the words. His eyes flicked back to the well, but the hands were gone, leaving nothing but the cold, dark void. The sound behind him made his blood run cold. The rustling had stopped and replaced by the slow, deliberate footsteps of his wife's corpse as it drew closer. Harold's heart pounded in his chest, the word join echoing in his mind like a death sentence. He looked at the well, at the note still clutched in his hand. The only way to escape the horror that was approaching, to stop the nightmare, was to follow the well's command. But how could he? How could he willingly throw himself into that abyss, knowing it would be the end? But then again, what choice did he have? Henrietta was nearly upon him, reeking of decay, her empty eye sockets fixed on him, as if she could still see. Harold could feel the cold, dead breath of his wife on his neck, hear the creak of her joints as she reached out for him. Out of options, Harold climbed onto the edge of the well, his body trembling with fear and pain. The cold stone bit into his hands as he balanced precariously, legs dangling over the edge, looking down into the darkness below. He didn't want to die, but he didn't want to face whatever was coming for him either. His mind raced, searching for any other solution, any way out. But there was nothing. Nothing but the well, the darkness, and the hands that had written those final, damning words. As Henrietta's corpse reached for him, her stiff cold fingers brushing against his skin, Harold made his decision. Closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let go. For a brief moment, he felt weightless, the wind rushing past him as he fell into the abyss. But then the impact came hard, fast, his body slamming into the sides of the well as he tumbled down. He felt bones break, skin tear, and then the cold, hard bottom met him with a final, thickening crunch. Pain exploded through his body, his limbs twisting at awkward angles as he landed on the shattered remains bucket. Pieces of wood embedded themselves in his flesh, and for a moment, he was sure he was dead. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Harold found himself still conscious, breathing with great difficulty, lying in a cramped cold space at the bottom of the well. He tried to move, but every part of his body screamed in protest. He was alive, but barely. Before his eyes could adjust to the darkness, he heard it. A soft rustling, like paper brushing against the brick walls as it descended to the well. The sound grew louder, closer, until a rolled up note struck him gently on the shoulder and fell beside him. Tied to it was a single match. Harold's hand shook as he reached for the match, striking it against a rough stone. The tiny flame flared to life, casting flickering shadows on the cold, damp walls. With trembling fingers, he unrolled the note and squinted at the words written there. On one side, in the same jagged script as before, was a question that had started this nightmare. What do you want most in this world? For a brief moment, hope flickered in Harold's chest. Was this another chance? One last opportunity to change his wish? To alter his fate? He looked around frantically, searching for something to write with. But the well offered nothing. No pencil, no lead, nothing at all. He scrambled at the bottom of the well, his hands searching desperately for the nub of the pencil he had used before, but came up empty.